Wiz Rocks by Terence Blacker. Read by Suzy Aitchison. Chapter 1. A few umpires never hurt anyone. A very strange noise was in the air. Sometimes it sounded like a racing car going round a bend. Meow. Then, quite without warning, the noise would toot and trumpet like an elephant losing its temper. Toot, troop, 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 toot. There would be moments when an old steam engine seemed to have arrived in the town. Occasionally, there would be a series of quieter sounds, like those rude noises your grandfather makes after eating too much Sunday dinner. And then suddenly, the racing car, the elephant, the steam engine, and your grandfather would return, together. Trip, trip, ch-ch-chuff. The noise seemed to be loudest around Rylet Road. There the birds had flown out of the trees in alarm, and parents brought their children in from the garden and rang one another to find out what was going on. "Is it an animal?" asked Mrs. Jones. "It sounds like it might be in pain." "Maybe it's a new kind of burglar alarm," said Mr. Edberg. "It would certainly scare me away." All the neighbours agreed. Something had to be done about the strange and terrible noise. At 15 Rylet Road, Cuthbert Harris, father of Peter, who was known to all his friends as Podge, sat in his favourite armchair reading the paper. "The lad's music lesson's going well, mother," he said loudly to his wife Mary, who sat opposite him. 5:30, said Mrs. Harris. "Me too," said Mr. Harris. He patted both ears. "And buying these earplugs for us both was an excellent idea of mine. We can't hear a thing." Mrs. Harris nodded. "Chicken pie and beans," she said. Just then, a man with long white hair and wild staring eyes tottered unsteadily into the room. "Can't take it any more," he muttered. Mr. Harris took out his earplugs. "Finished Peter's lesson already, Mr. Jericho?" he asked. "My, doesn't time fly when there's lovely music in the air?" "Lovely music? Lovely?" Mr. Jericho, the music teacher, put his hands to his head. "That son of yours is playing notes that have never been invented." "Oh, yes, he's talented all right," Mr. Harris chuckled. "I knew the trombone would be his instrument. I do love a brass band. It's the umpires that get me every time." "We'll see you next Tuesday then, Mr. Jericho," said Mrs. Harris, taking out her earplugs. "I don't think you will," said Mr. Jericho. "Peter's a nice enough lad, but between you and me, he hasn't got a musical bone in that rather large body of his. Maybe you could encourage him to do something quieter. Read books or go for walks. Very long walks, if possible. Now, Mr. Jericho." But before Mr. Harris could finish his sentence, the music teacher was backing towards the door. "Don't bother to pay me," he said with a little wave of his hand. "My freedom from this house will be reward enough." And he was gone. "How very strange," said Mrs. Harris. "No backbone, these musicians." Mr. Harris sniffed contemptuously. "I bet he plays the violin." "Maybe you should have let Peter play the guitar," said Mrs. Harris nervously. "That was what he had his heart set on." "Guitar?" Cuthbert Harris shuddered with disgust. "And we all know where that leads. Long hair and inappropriate behaviour. That's where. No, a brass band is what I like. It's the sound of life, of progress, a manly sound. You can't go wrong in this world when you play the trombone, that's what I always say." The doorbell rang. "That'll be Mr. Jericho," said Mr. Harris. "I knew he'd change his mind." But when Mrs. Harris opened the front door, it was her neighbours, Mrs. Jones and Mr. Edberg, who were there. "We're collecting names for a petition," said Mrs. Jones. "It's about this terrible noise we've been hearing. We want the police to investigate." "Noise? Police?" said Mrs. Harris faintly. "Will you sign the petition, Mary?" asked Mr. Edberg. "Everyone else in the street has." Glancing nervously over her shoulder, Mrs. Harris signed. When she returned to the sitting room, she sat down thoughtfully. "Cuthbert, there's a bit of a problem with Peter and his trombone," she said. "There's a petition about it."
"Petition?"
said Mr. Harris. "By the neighbours," said Mrs. Harris, "about the noise."
"Stuff and nonsense," said Mr. Harris. "A few umpires never hurt anyone."
"They mentioned the police." Mr. Harris sighed.
"I'll talk to the lad,"
he said. "Now don't hurt his feelings, Cuthbert," said Mrs. Harris. "You know how sensitive he can be."
"Trust me," said Mr. Harris. "I'm a dad."
A few moments later, Mr. Harris stood in the middle of Podge's room.
"There's a problem with that trombone, son," he said. "The problem is that you're completely useless at playing it."
Podge looked up from the bed.
"But Mr. Jericho says you haven't got a musical bone in your body. The neighbours are revolting too. They've said that if you blow into that thing once more—"
He nodded in the direction of the trombone on Podge's bed.
"It'll be a matter for the police."
"I like music," said Podge quietly.
"The problem is music doesn't like you," said his father.
He picked up the trombone.
"I'll look after that. It's caused quite enough trouble already."
With the trombone under his arm, Mr. Harris left the room, closing the door firmly behind him. He stood on the landing outside and smiled. Yes, he thought he had handled that rather well. Alone and tromboneless, Podge reached for his mobile phone and rang his best friend, Jack Beddoes.
"Hey,"
he said.
"Hey,"
said Jack.
"Kick about,"
said Podge.
"Cool,"
said Jack. 5 minutes later, in the local park, Podge stood watching Jack bouncing a football on his foot.
"I suppose I should have guessed there was a problem with my music when my parents bought earplugs," he said.
"It's not a great sign," Jack agreed.
"I wanted my mum to buy me a drum set. She said I had to practice first."
"Practice?" I said.
On what exactly?"
"The table," she said.
"The table?"
Jack booted the football high in the air. It came to rest in some bushes near the entrance to the park. As they walked towards it, Podge and Jack heard the sound of music. They crouched in the bushes and peered through the railings. On the pavement across the street, a woman was standing in front of an upturned hat. She was playing what looked like a very small guitar. Although she was dressed rather oddly, a battered straw hat, dark glasses and ripped three-quarter-length jeans, there was something familiar about the black nail varnish on her fingernails. Jack and Podge looked at one another as the same thought occurred to both of them. Ms. Wiz, playing music? Chapter 2. Groove with the Magic. Actually, Ms. Wiz was not bad at playing music, but she wasn't great either. Podge and Jack crossed the road and listened politely as, with a slightly mad smile on her face, she sang her song. Take time to smell the flowers, see the birdies in the sky. Let's run barefoot when it showers, wave our arms like a butterfly. She stopped playing, but just as Podge and Jack clapped their hands, she started singing again, more loudly this time. Wave your arms like a butterfly, like a lovely groovy butterfly. Whoa, said Jack, now that she really did seem to have finished. Cool song, Ms. Wiz. Do you like it? Said Ms. Wiz. I wrote it in 1967. 1967? Said Podge. But that's years ago. The Summer of Love it was called, because love was all around us. You could feel it in your fingers and feel it in your toes. How old were you then? Asked Jack. I mean, if you were about 20 then, that means that now you're forever young, said Ms. Wiz quickly. Back in 1967, everybody thought they were forever young. But I think I'm right in saying I'm the only person who has actually managed it. She reached into the bag that was beside her on the pavement and took out a pair of drumsticks, which she handed to Jack. Then she took out a small instrument like the one she had been playing and gave it to Podge. "This is called a ukulele," she said. "All the best guitarists start on a uke." She looked at them both. "Maybe we could play together." Podge winced. "There's a bit of a problem with music and me," he said. "My teacher, Mr. Jericho, says—" He stopped. There was a faint humming sound in the air. "I know that sound," said Jack. "It means that magic's about to happen." Ms. Wiz shook her head. "It's just giving me the note. We're doing this one in the key of C. 1, 2, 3, 4. She started to play her ukulele. "Take time to smell the flowers." Jack glanced at Podge and shrugged. He began to tap his drumsticks in time on the railing. Suddenly, as if his hands no longer belonged to him, he was drumming out a fast beat. Podge held the ukulele in front of him. His fingers came to life and strummed the strings. "What's happening?" he said, as music poured out of the uke. "Wave our arms like a butterfly," sang Ms. Wiz. The music that Podge and Jack were playing was faster than Ms. Wiz's tune, so that it began to seem as if she were in the background. Suddenly, without even knowing he was doing it, Podge began to sing. 67, they thought it was heaven, they were forever young. They once were freaky, but now they're creaky, so let's show them how it's done. Jack laughed as he did a little roll of rhythm with his drumsticks. Podge pointed at Ms. Wiz. "You say she's a hippie, but I don't buy it. That peace and love, why don't we try it? Birdies and butterflies are not so tragic. Let's get on down and groove with the magic." Now Jack joined in with the chorus. "The summer of love is back. The summer of love is back. Listen to the whiz. Look out, she's the biz. The summer of love is back." Ms. Wiz closed her eyes and swayed to her own music. "Like a lovely groovy butterfly." By now, a crowd of children with their parents had gathered around. As Ms. Wiz, Podge and Jack played, there were murmurs of admiration. When they finished, everyone started clapping. "That was amazing," said a young mother, standing at the front of the crowd with a pram. "It was a crazy fusion thing, a bit of hip-hop, a bit of grandparent hippie music from the 60s. "Hey, we've invented hippie-hop," said Jack. But Ms. Wiz was frowning. "Did you say grandparent music?" she asked. The woman shrugged. "Well, it is from quite a long time ago," she said. "We're talking about our generation," said Ms. Wiz. "All we are saying is give peace a chance. What's so funny about peace, love and understanding?"
"Those kids are amazing,"
said a man Podge recognised as living in his street.
"How did you learn to play like that, Peter?"
Podge glanced nervously at Jack. "It just sort of came naturally," he said. "Yeah," said Jack, "as if by magic." "What's the name of your group?" a little girl asked shyly. There was a moment's silence. Then Ms. Wiz stepped forward. "We call ourselves the Groovy Butterflies of Universal Peace and Love." "We do?" said Jack. "Great name, Ms. Wiz," muttered Podge. "Really snappy." "Perhaps we could shorten it to the first letters of the name," said Jack. "That would be—" It took a moment for him to work it out. "Gaboo-pow." "You should put your stuff on the internet," said the woman with the pram. "Have you tried MySpace?" "We're quite happy with our own space, thank you very much," said Ms. Wiz. The woman looked confused. "What about Facebook?" "I don't wear makeup," said Ms. Wiz. She took the ukulele from Podge and the drumsticks from Jack, and then turned to the crowd. "Thanks for listening to the Groovy Butterflies of Universal Peace and Love." With that, she picked up her bag and began walking down the street. Smiling apologetically to the crowd, Podge and Jack followed her. "Is that it, Ms. Wiz? Aren't we going to play again?" asked Podge as he tried to keep up with her. "It's always best to keep the audience wanting more," said Ms. Wiz. "But we could be pop stars," said Jack. "In a couple of months, the name of our group could be on everyone's lips. Gaboo-pow." "I don't want to be a pop star," said Ms. Wiz. Fame isn't all it's made out to be. At that moment, Ms. Wiz and Jack noticed that Podge had stopped walking. They walked back to where he was standing. He was staring back to where they had been playing.
All I wanted to do was play some more songs. I was living my dream back there.
Ms. Wiz seemed to think for a moment. I'll be playing outside the park tomorrow at the same time. Now I'd better be off. She took out her mobile and began to dial. As they watched, she faded slowly from view.
Did all that actually happen?
Jack murmured to Podge. Podge was clicking his fingers in time to a beat in his head.
The summer of love is back,
he said.
Oh yeah, the summer of love is back.
Chapter 3. I'm talented, make me a star. Later that evening, as usual, the Harris family sat down to watch their favourite TV programme, The Avenue. The previous night on The Avenue, Doreen, who lived at number 23, had been seen kissing Phil, the new landlord at the Crown, and The Avenue's local gossip, Jason, who has just moved into number 6, had told Doreen's husband, Ashok.
This is really great.
Mr. Harris rubbed his hands as the opening credits rolled.
I can't imagine what life would be like without The Avenue.
Shh, said Mrs. Harris, nodding in the direction of Podge. The boy's trying to listen. But although Podge was staring at the screen, his thoughts were not on The Avenue at all, but on what it had been like to play the ukulele and to sing in time with his strumming fingers. Just then the telephone rang.
Oh, bother, said Mr. Harris. Who could that be? Everyone knows we have family time in front of the telly after we've had our tea.
Let's leave it, Dad, said Mrs. Harris. The telephone kept ringing.
I'll get it, said Podge, standing up. It could be Jack.
He walked into the hall and picked up the receiver.
Oh, hi there.
The man's voice on the other end of the telephone sounded odd, as if he was talking while trying to smile at the same time.
Is that the Harris household?
Yes,
said Podge.
Could I speak to the musician in the family?
Podge frowned.
I think you might have got the wrong number,
he said.
It's Peter Harris I'm looking for, said the man. Plays the ukulele and sings like an angel, I've been told. Would that be you by any chance?
I'm not exactly musical, said Podge.
Ha, 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 ha.
The man's laughter sounded like someone trying to start a car with a rather flat battery.
And he's modest, too. I like that in my young stars.
Who is this?
asked Podge.
I am Cy, said the man. Cy Smooth? You might have seen me on one of my shows. Have I really got talent? Or Crazy but Talented? Or Talent Swap? Or even the world's most incredibly talented celebrities?
Cy Smooth, said Podge. Are you the judge who's always very rude?
That's me, said Cy Smooth. I'm famous for my catchphrases. That's appalling! And that's amazing!
He did his dead motor laugh again.
Now, the good news, Pete, is that we're looking for acts for our new show. You'll never guess the title.
I don't know. Maybe something to do with talent?
Brilliant, you must be psychic, Pete. It's called I'm Talented, Make Me a Star. And Pete, one of my team happens to live in your road, and he caught you and your friends busking in the park this afternoon. And we want your group, the...
Podge heard the sound of rustling paper.
Ah, yes, the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love, to appear on our first show. The word on the street is that you could be the next big thing.
But we don't...
Great. Here's the address and my mobile number. Tomorrow at 5.
Podge noted the details on a pad beside the telephone.
Now, Pete, love, you will be there, won't you? Asked Cy Smooth.
Well,
said Podge.
That's perfect. In fact, that's amazing! Bye!
Podge wandered back into the sitting room. His parents were staring at the screen. Mrs. Harris seemed to be crying.
"You missed Ashok's row with Doreen," she said. "It was heartbreaking."
"Serves her right," said Mr. Harris. "That Doreen's no better than she should be."
"That was Cy Smooth, the famous TV celebrity on the telephone," said Podge. "He wants me to appear in a national talent show."
"Very nice, dear," said Mrs. Harris, her eyes still fixed to the screen. "Now, come and watch the avenue."
"Uh-oh," said Podge's father. "Phil's come to see Doreen to find out what's happened. Now there'll be trouble."
At first, when Jack met Podge in the park the next day, he refused to believe what Podge was saying.
"Cy Smooth called you, personally? He wants us to play on his show?"
Podge nodded.
"Yep."
That's amazing!"
Jack did a little dance.
"I'm going to be a star, I'm going to be a star," he sang.
Yeah,
said Podge. "But you seem to have forgotten one small problem. We can't actually play any music." "With a bit of magic we can," laughed Jack. "Let's go and see Ms. Wiz. She'll be up for it."
Ms. Wiz was standing in the same place, with the same hat in front of her, singing the same song.
"Wave your arms like a butterfly, like a lovely groovy butterfly."
When she finished, Podge and Jack clapped politely.
"It's very good," Podge said politely. "But do you know any other songs?"
"Of course I do," said Ms. Wiz. "Here's another of my favourite numbers from the 1960s. She strummed her ukulele. I just hope I can remember the words." She took a deep breath. "Ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling, I'm just sitting here doing my thing." "Oh, dear," murmured Jack. Ms. Wiz glanced at him, then strummed her ukulele once more.
"Hear me sing in the spring, look at me, I really...
"Ming?" suggested Jack. "What does that mean?" asked Ms. Wiz.
"It's a modern word for being groovy."
Podge nudged Jack hard in the ribs.
"Hey!"
Ms. Wiz punched the air.
"Aye, Ming!" "Ms. Wiz, we need to talk to you about Cy Smooth," said Podge. "He called me last night."
"Smooth? What a very odd name," said Ms. Wiz. "Who is he?"
"You must have heard of Cy Smooth," said Jack. "He's big on TV."
"I don't care where he's big, and I'm not interested in TV."
"Does that mean you won't want our group to be on his talent show?" asked Jack.
"Our group?" Ms. Wiz plucked thoughtfully at a string on her ukulele. "You mean he's into our sounds, man?"
"He certainly is," said Podge. "He thinks the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love could be the next big thing."
"The next big thing? I've always wanted to be the next big thing." Ms. Wiz smiled. "I rather like the sound of Mr. Smooth," she said.
"The only trouble is that he wants us to audition for his show, and the audition starts in about half an hour's time."
"And it's on the other side of town," said Jack. "And we haven't enough money for a taxi." He looked into the hat which Ms. Wiz had left on the pavement. It contained one 20p coin.
"Nor have you."
"Do you have Mr. Smooth's telephone number?" asked Ms. Wiz. Podge reached into the pocket of his trousers and took out a piece of paper.
"Here's the number he gave me,"
he said, passing it to Ms. Wiz. She took a small, bright pink mobile phone from her bag and began to dial the number.
"There's no point in talking to him," said Jack. "He's just about to do a show. What's that noise?"
All around them, a low humming sound could be heard. "Place one finger each on the phone, boys," said Ms. Wiz. "This is a real mobile. It can move us to the exact place of the phone whose number I've dialed." The humming sound grew louder. Nervously, Podge and Jack extended a finger and touched the phone. Immediately they felt a tingling in their feet, which rose slowly up their legs. Jack glanced down and made an odd gulping noise.
"Don't look now, Podge," he said. "But I think we're vanishing." "Hang on, Ms. Wiz."
There was panic in Podge's voice.
"What about my—"
But by the time he had finished the sentence, All three of them, with the ukulele and the bag and the hat, had disappeared. Podgy's last word hung in the air above an empty street. Tea! Chapter 4. You Gotta Dazzle, Kid.
And who are you?
Those were the first words that Jack and Podge heard after their journey through space. There had been a roaring in their ears, a sense that their bodies had been travelling through the air at the speed of a bullet, a firework display of lights in front of their closed eyes. And then, I said, "Who are you? And come to think of it, why are you standing around my desk in my office with your fingers on my mobile telephone?" Podge slowly opened his eyes. They were in an office. The man who had been talking was small, dark-haired, and reminded Podge of someone he knew. His finger was touching an elegant grey phone which lay on a desk. Beside him, Ms. Wiz seemed to stir into life, removing her finger from the phone and rubbing it against her other hand. "It's just a magic thing," she explained. "We happen to be able to travel through space at the speed of a text message. It's nothing special." The dark-haired man frowned and turned to a young woman who stood nearby holding a clipboard. "Who are these people, Trudy?" he murmured. "And what are they doing in my office?" "Search me, Si," said the woman called Trudy. "I'll call security to get them thrown out." "Si?" Podge spoke the name out loud. Now he knew who the man had reminded him of. He looked like a smaller, older, crosser version of Si Smooth when he was on TV. "Have we met?" The man narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Or are you just a fan?" "We spoke on the phone yesterday," said Podge. "I'm Peter Harris. You said that our group, the Groovy Butterflies of Universal Peace and Love, were going to be the next big thing." Si gave a little laugh. "Well, I can see that you're certainly going to be the next big thing. In fact, you're quite a big thing already." Embarrassed, Podge put his hands in front of his stomach. Trudy whispered in Si Smooth's ear. He listened to her, nodding slowly. When he turned back to Podge, Jack and Ms. Wiz, a wide smile was in place. "Ah, yes, those groovy butterflies of universal peace and love," he said, extending a hand to Podge. "How could it have slipped my mind?" Podge shook his hand. "And this is Jack," he said. "Yo, Jack!" Si Smooth held up a hand. "Gimme 5." With a little wince, Jack slapped his hand. "And this is Ms. Wiz," said Podge. Si winked at Ms. Wiz. "Hi, Mum. Glad you could come along," he said. Ms. Wiz gave a little start, as if someone had just squirted water in her face. "Excuse me," she said. "I am not anyone's mum." Yeah, manager whatevs," said Si Smooth. "As it happens," said Ms. Wiz, with a proud little smile, "I was told only yesterday that I'm Ming." "Actually," said Jack quickly, "it was Miss Wiz who—" "Hey, kids!" Si Smooth held up a hand. "I could stand around shooting the breeze with you all day, but bottom line, I've got a hit TV show to produce in—" He glanced at a large watch on his wrist. 7 minutes' time." "And what do we have to do for the audition?" asked Podge. "Do?" Si Smooth glanced at his assistant, Trudy. "The kid needs to know what he has to do." Suddenly, the smile on his face was gone. "You gotta dazzle, kid. You gotta shine. You gotta knock my socks off with your incredible star quality. Comprende?" Without another word, he left the office. "Sorry about that," said Trudy. "We've had a bad day. The guy who was going to play Moon River on the musical handsaw had an accident and cut his finger. It was so sad. We really needed that saw player. Shall I show you to the rehearsal room?" The rehearsal room was not a room at all. It was a big, brightly lit hall, packed with adults and children and animals and music and noise. In every corner of the room, there was someone practicing for the big moment when they hoped Si Smooth would make them a star. "Who are all these people?" Ms. Wiz covered her ears with her hands. "I really don't like crowds." We put an advertisement in the newspaper asking for anyone with talent to come for auditions for the show," said Trudy. "But—" Jack watched a rather large man who had been juggling 3 oranges drop them one after the other. "They haven't got talent."
"You know that. I know that. Anyone with eyes and ears would know that. But they don't."
A man with spiky hair and comedy glasses walked up to them, waving a pack of cards like a fan.
"Take a card, any card,"
he said to Miss Wiz.
"Not now, sonny,"
said Miss Wiz.
"Don't you like magic, then?"
the man asked, winking at Miss Wiz. "Uh-oh," said Jack. "I'm not in the mood," said Miss Wiz coldly.
"Ooh, get her,"
said the magician to Podge.
"She's too posh for magic."
Sighing, Miss Wiz turned to him. "Oh, if you insist," she said, clicking her fingers in the direction of the cards. All the symbols slid off the cards and fell to the ground. Running through the clubs, hearts, spades and diamonds on the floor were the brightly dressed figures of kings, queens and jacks. 2 jokers were chasing one another. "They're the characters you see on cards," laughed Podge. "They've come to life." "Hey, that's good." The magician shook his head in admiration. "That's really good. Are you in the business?" "I am the business," said Miss Wiz. A tiny king and queen were wandering off hand in hand. "Could you put them back on the cards now?" asked the magician. "I don't want to lose them." But Miss Wiz had turned to Trudy. "Now, we'll just need a small table on stage," she said. "It's for Jack to play his drumsticks on."
"Please, miss, please. I'm losing my kings and queens," said the magician.
Miss Wiz clicked her fingers and the figures and symbols were back on the cards. "Magic should never be used for personal gain," she said. "It's one of my golden rules." Podge was looking around him. "We're going to be here all night," he murmured to Jack. "What about my tea?" Trudy glanced around her. Dropping her voice, she said, "We'll hear you early. The fact is, we know who's going to get through the audition already." "You do?" said Jack. "We'll have a girl group called the Hey Babes." She pointed to 2 dark-haired girls and a blonde who were standing moodily in one corner. "There's a young comedian called Darren Quip, a grandpa who plays old songs on a piano, a 5-year-old girl singer called Millie Piper the Little Nightingale with a gap in her front teeth, and a woman called Frida with her dog Billy who sings hits from the 1980s. They call their act Absolutely Barking." She glanced at her watch. "You should be on soon," she said. Miss Wiz was shaking her head. "A singing dog?" she said. "Did you just say we're competing with a singing dog?" Before Trudy could reply, a voice was heard over the loudspeaker system.
"Cy Smooth is ready for the first acts. Could we please have the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love on stage, please?"
The next 5 minutes were like the strangest of dreams. Podge, Jack and Miss Wiz followed Trudy to a door which led to the place where the audition would take place. They walked down some steps, along a twisting corridor, through a curtain and onto the stage, which was completely dark, except for one spotlight which lit up a small table. "The table's for Jack to drum on," Trudy whispered. "Cy will guide you through." Nervously, they moved into the centre of the stage. The brightness of the light made their eyes ache.
"OK, butterflies."
The voice of Cy Smooth came at them out of the darkness.
"What will you be playing for us tonight?"
"We shall be playing one of our own compositions," said Miss Wiz. "It is called Take Time to Smell the Summer of Love is Back," said Podge quickly. "I prefer Take Time to Smell the Flowers," said Miss Wiz. "It's really important in this life that when everyone's so busy they should just remember the beauty of the lovely little flowers."
"Never mind the lovely little flowers," Cy Smooth shouted. "Just get on with the song."
Miss Wiz reached into her bag and took out 2 ukuleles and a pair of drumsticks. She handed Podge and Jack their instruments. A low humming noise could be heard around them, and suddenly they were playing the music again. The song seemed to be over in no time. When they finished, there was a brief moment of silence, followed by a murmur of voices from the darkness.
"OK."
It was Cy Smooth again.
You're in the final of I've Got Talent, Make Me a Star. Trudy will give you the details.
Yeah,
said Podge and Jack together. You are great boys, said Cy from the darkness. Ms. Wiz cleared her throat.
Ahem,
she said.
boys.
Sorry, love. The backing track was fine too, really funny. Trudy appeared on the stage with the next act, the Hay Babes. Can you find your way back to the rehearsal room? She asked Ms. Wiz. As they walked down the corridor, Ms. Wiz muttered to herself,
Backing track? Funny.
What did he mean?
I really think we should get back,
said Podge.
Quite right, said Ms. Wiz, taking out her pink mobile phone. We've had enough fun for one night. It's time to vanish. Fingers on the phone.
Slowly, Podge opened his eyes. He was in the park.
Was that a dream?
said Jack, who was standing beside him. Ms. Wiz tapped her pink phone. It's a marvellous little mobile, this one. I just press redial and it takes me back to where I was when I made my last call. I think everyone should have one.
Which means we've just been talking to Cy Smooth and he's going to make us famous in a week's time, said Jack.
Fame isn't all it's cracked up to be, said Ms. Wiz. Your life is no longer your own. Everyone wants a part of you. Photographers camp outside your doorstep. You can't even go shopping without complete strangers asking for your autograph.
Oh, no, said Jack. And my writing's terrible. I'd better start practicing my autograph right now.
Hang on. Podge closed his eyes, as if trying to work out a particularly difficult thought.
You said that magic should never be used for selfish purposes, he said to Ms. Wiz.
It's my golden rule, said Ms. Wiz.
So what are we doing with our music spell? We'd be winning a talent competition when we haven't really got any talent.
Speak for yourself, said Jack.
It just seems a bit unfair on the rest,
said Podge.
That's showbiz, said Jack. It's dog-eat-dog out there, or dog-eat-singing dog in our case.
Ms. Wiz reached into her case and took out a ukulele, which she handed to Podge.
You're absolutely right, she said.
If we're going to appear on television next week, we had all better start practicing. Podge plucked at a string. It made a sad, tuneless note.
On the other hand, maybe a bit of magic wouldn't hurt.
No, said Miss Wiz firmly. If the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love can't play without magic, then we don't deserve to win anything. We should do it for real or not at all. She took out a book from her bag. This shows you how to play the ukulele. We'll meet every day in the park to have a practice. She began to dial on her mobile phone. Same place, same time tomorrow, she said as she began to vanish. Before Podge or Jack could reply, she was gone.
Nice one, Podge, said Jack. Now what are we going to do?
Podge strummed the ukulele. It made a tuneless, jangling sound.
Panic, he said.
Chapter 5. A Witch with a Guitar. Mr. Harris was not pleased when his son returned from the park with a new musical instrument.
You know what I've always told you, Peter Harris, he said. There'll be no guitars in this house. Guitars only lead to unnecessariness.
It's not a guitar, said Podge. It's called a ukulele.
Mrs. Harris walked in from the kitchen.
A ukulele? She said. Oh, I do love the sound of a ukulele. It reminds me of the music my parents used to play when I was young. Can you play Tiptoe Through the Tulips?
See what I mean? Snapped Mr. Harris. Your mother's gone unnecessary already. Where did you get that thing, anyway?
Podge winced. It was the question he had been dreading.
Jack and I happened to meet an old friend in the park. She just happened to be playing some music and happened to have some spare instruments with her.
That's nice, Peter, said his mother. What's your friend's name? Podge took a deep breath.
Ms. Wiz, he mumbled hurriedly. Now I think I'll go to my room and practice.
Hang on, said Mr. Harris. Did you just say Wiz? You are not, I very much hope, referring to that witch woman who turns teachers into geese and policemen into rabbits.
Paranormal operative, Cuthbert, said Mrs. Harris. Ms. Wiz says that calling her a witch gives people the wrong idea.
I speak as I find, said Mr. Harris. A witch is a witch is a witch. And if there's one thing worse than a witch, it's a witch with a guitar.
Ukulele, said Podge and Mrs. Harris together.
She spells trouble, that woman. I'll not have my family messing around with magic, and that's final.
We formed a group, Jack, Ms. Wiz and me, said Podge quietly. We were going to be on a TV talent show next week.
Talent show? Mr. Harris laughed. Don't talk daft. The only talent you've got is for eating pies.
That was what the telephone call last night was about, said Podge. It was Cy Smooth asking us to audition for his new show, I'm Talented, Make Me a Star. It starts next week. Do you mean Cy? That's appalling, Smooth, said Mrs. Harris. I like him.
Stuff and nonsense.
Mr. Harris reached for a TV guide.
What's your group called anyway?
The Groovy Butterflies of Universal Peace and Love, said Podge. Lovely name, said Mrs. Harris.
Groovy butterflies, muttered Mr. Harris. Groovy troublemakers more like it.
Oh, something in the TV guide seemed to have caught his eye.
As it happens, there is a new Cy Smooth series, and it is called I'm Talented, Make Me a Star. You've been looking through this guide, haven't you, Peter? I've told you about telling...
He can't have Cuthbert, Mrs. Harris interrupted. We bought it while he was in the park. Mr. Harris was staring at the guide in his hands.
It says here that there's a prize of £100,000 for the winner of the show, he said faintly.
We're not really in it for the money, said Podge.
100,000 big ones.
A strange smile had settled on Mr. Harris's face.
Maybe I was a little hasty about the unnecessariness.
Podge frowned.
You mean? I'll tell you what I mean, son, said Mr. Harris. I mean, get practising, now.
Alone in his room, Podge opened the book which Ms. Wiz had given him. It was called Learn the Ukulele in a Day. He learned how to tune the ukulele and where to put his fingers. He strummed nervously. Then he began to sing quietly. Outside his bedroom door, Mr. and Mrs. Harris were listening. He's got a bit of a way to go before he can play for Cy Smooth, said Mrs. Harris.
Stuff and nonsense, said Mr. Harris. I always said that boy had talent. £100,000. I could buy a new car. And golf clubs.
At first, when Podge met Miss Wiz and Jack in the park to practice together without magic, the noise they made frightened the birds away. By the third day, they were more or less starting and finishing at the same time. By the fifth, people were gathering around to listen to them. When they sang The Summer of Love is Back, it sounded different from the way it had been when they were under the influence of magic, but people still clapped in time to it and applauded when they finished playing. I think, said Miss Wiz, smiling at Podge and Jack, that the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love are ready for the big time. Chapter 6. Lose the Hippie. The day of the show began badly. Trudy, Cy Smooth's assistant, rang Podge early that morning to tell them that a car would be collecting them at 11 o'clock. What clothes should we wear? Asked Podge. Just be natural, said Trudy. Natural and smart. That was where the trouble began.
Smart?
Said Mr. Harris.
We'll put him in that nice suit we bought him for Cousin Lily's wedding.
I'm meant to be playing in a rock group, said Podge.
You can wear a really colourful tie if you like, said Mr. Harris. I'm not having my son appearing on TV looking like a ragamuffin.
Unfortunately, when he arrived at the front door, Jack was dressed rather differently. He looked as if he had been in a fight. His jeans were torn, there was a hole in one of his trainers, and his big toe was sticking through it.
Under his coat, he was wearing a baggy T-shirt with the words Iron Butterfly on it. The word iron had been crossed out with marker pen and replaced with groovy.
When my mum was young, she was a fan of this band called Iron Butterfly, Jack explained. She said she always knew that T-shirt would be useful one day.
But we were meant to be smart, said Podge.
Mr. and Mrs. Harris appeared in the hallway behind Podge. To his surprise, they hardly looked at Jack, but were staring down the road.
"What on earth is that?" said Mrs. Harris.
It was Miss Wiz. She looked like a fairground fortune-teller from a very bad, very old film. There was a wispy purple scarf around her head, and she wore a billowing green and purple patchwork dress. Various heavy metal ornaments hung around her neck, making a jangly noise as she walked. She was barefoot. As she approached the Harrises' front door, she held up both hands in a V-shaped peace sign.
"Hey, butterflies," she said. "Are we ready to make sweet music?"
"I hope you're not planning to go on national TV looking like that," said Mr. Harris. "You look like you're going to a fancy dress party."
Miss Wiz put her face close to Mr. Harris's.
"What's it like in Straight City, man? Can you see me through the bars of the prison of your mind? I'm just doing my thing, OK? Hanging loose, yeah? Like the summer of love is totally back?"
"Summer of nutters, more like," said Mr. Harris.
"Hey, you, get off of my cloud," said Miss Wiz.
"Maybe I could lend you something," said Mrs. Harris. "I've got a very nice coat and skirt." But it was too late. At that moment, a long white limousine eased its way into the street. The car pulled up in front of the Harrises' house. A driver in a uniform stepped out. "Is this the right address for the groovy butterflies of universal peace and love?" he asked. At the Sigh Smooth Television Theatre, Podge, Jack and Miss Wiz met the other acts who were going to take part on the programme. The Hay Babes were there, and so was Darren Quip, the comedian, and Harry Brown, the piano player. The girl singer with a gap in her teeth, Millie Piper, the little nightingale, sat nervously with her mother. Billy, of Absolutely Barking, was being given treats in a corner. At first, Trudy was worried that Podge, Jack and Miss Wiz were dressed rather differently from one another. "One of you looks like a businessman from the 1980s, the other like a heavy metal rocker from the 1970s, and I'm from the 1960s, said Miss Wiz. "We're like a musical history lesson." I guess, said Trudy uncertainly. As the audience arrived at the theatre that afternoon, Trudy gathered the acts together in a back room. "Just go out and enjoy yourselves," she said, a big smile on her face. "We're on live TV, so if anything goes a bit wrong, keep going at all costs." Billy, from Absolutely Barking, made an odd whining sound. "Nice doggy." Millie Piper, the little nightingale, was about to pat the dog.
"Don't touch the dog!" screamed Frida. "He's just had his hair done." Here's one," said Darren Quip, the comedian. "How'd you find a dog that's lost in the woods? Put your ear next to a tree and listen for the bark. Bark, get it? On the tree, woof woof."
"Would you like me to play How Much Is That Doggy in the Window on the Wurlitzer?" asked Harry, Mr. Piano Brown.
Thank you, save it for the show," Trudy called out. "Now, you know how it goes. After you have performed, the three judges, Danny Deaver, the celebrity chef, the actress Lorraine Bustle, and Sigh Smooth, will tell you exactly what they think of it."
"And what do we do?"
asked one of the Hay Babes. "You keep smiling," said Trudy. "So, first on will be Harry, Mr. Piano Brown, all right?" From backstage, Podge, Jack and Miss Wiz waited nervously as the other acts performed. Harry Brown was greeted with polite applause. The Hay Babes had the audience clapping along with them. Millie Piper, the little nightingale, sang her songs squeakily to huge cheers. There was nervous laughter for Darren Quip, followed by boos when none of the judges liked his act. Then it was their turn. "Taking us back in time," said the announcer, "please welcome
The groovy butterflies of universal peace and love.
They walked onto the stage and took their place, smiling into the dazzling lights. Standing between Jack and Podge, Ms. Wiz began to play. Take time to smell the flowers, see the birdies in the sky. There was a ripple of uncertain laughter from the audience. Sitting with the two other judges, Cy Smooth winced. Then Podge began to strum. There were only 3 chords in the song, but even without the help of the magic, he got the rhythm. Then Jack came in, tapping out the rhythm on the table. Soon the audience was clapping along. By the time they hit the final chorus, Podge felt himself smiling.
The summer of love is back. The summer of love is back. Listen to the whiz. Look at she's the biz. The summer of love is back.
There was a crash of applause and cheering as they hit the final note. Slowly it died as the lights came up on the 3 judges. Danny Deaver was writing on a pad in front of him. He looked up as if, just for a moment, he had forgotten he was on television.
I like the look, he said, and the name is hilarious. I like the boys dressed as a businessman and a heavy rocker. The comedian with flowers in her hair is kind of funny too. You know what? I think you could go far in this competition.
Comedian? Said Miss Wiz. Who's the comedian?
Just keep smiling,
Podge muttered. Lorraine Bustle seemed to be in tears.
That was just so great, she said, dabbing at her eyes. You've got youth, you've got age. Peter, you've got the most lovely voice I've ever heard. You've got everything, you're just groovy.
Age? Who's got age? Said Miss Wiz, rather more loudly this time.
Keep smiling,
said Jack. All eyes turned to Cy Smooth.
Boys, he said, I have 2 words to say to you. That's amazing!
The audience erupted with applause.
But
he held up a hand for silence.
I've got to give you some tough advice, guys. You 2 are great, but if you're going to get on in this business, I have an important message for you.
He paused, then pointed at Miss Wiz.
Lose the hippie, he said. She's funny in a weird sort of way, but frankly, she's holding you back from stardom. She's way too old-fashioned.
Hippie? Miss Wiz took a step forward.
Funny? Way too old-fashioned?
Cy Smooth turned to the audience.
What does everyone else think? He asked.
Lose the hippie,
a woman shouted from the front row.
Go home, love,
said someone else.
Leave it to the kids. Excuse me.
Miss Wiz tried to speak, but now the audience was chanting.
Lose the hippie, lose the hippie, lose the hippie.
A low, angry growl, which only Podge and Jack could hear, came from Miss Wiz, followed by a distant humming noise.
No magic, Miss Wiz, said Podge. We agreed.
The ukulele in Miss Wiz's hands seemed to be growing. Within seconds, it became a bright, gleaming electric guitar. Amazed, the audience fell silent. Miss Wiz raised her hand high in the air, then brought it crashing down on the guitar where her fingers raced across the fretboard, making a deafening noise.
Yeah!
She screamed. The noise of her voice and the guitar was so loud that it was as if a great gale was buffeting the audience from the stage.
No!
shouted Cy Smooth, but it was too late. Something black flew off his head. Only when Miss Wiz stopped singing and screaming and the wind died down did it become clear what had happened. Cy Smooth was sitting in his chair. His head was as bald and shiny as a billiard ball.
Cut!
He screamed, trying to cover his head with his hands.
Cut!
What happened, Mother?
Back home, Mr. and Mrs. Harris sat staring at a blank television screen. I rather think Miss Wiz lost her temper, said Mrs. Harris, and Cy Smooth lost his hair. I never knew he wore a wig.
Never mind that, said Mr. Harris. What about the groovy butterflies of what's-it?
Just then, the picture on the TV screen flickered into life. It showed 2 pandas sitting in a tree, eating bamboo shoots. "We seem to be having technical problems with I'm Talented, Make Me a Star," said the voice of an announcer. "So, instead of this week's programme, here's a really nice documentary about giant pandas."
Pandas, Mother?
Mr. Harris stared about him wildly.
Pandas in a talent competition? That can't be right.
"The show's off, Cuthbert," said Mrs. Harris.
But what about my £100,000?
Mrs. Harris sighed. "It's exactly as you said, Cuthbert." She laid her hand on his. "About guitars. I'm afraid there's been a bit of unnecessariness." When all the acts on I'm Talented, Make Me a Star discovered that their show had been replaced by a documentary about pandas, there was confusion backstage at the Cy Smooth Television Theatre. Millie Piper, the little nightingale, was having a tantrum. Her mother was shouting into a mobile phone. Billy, from absolutely barking, had bitten Harry, Mr. Piano Brown, on the leg. The Hay Babes were not speaking to one another, for reasons that no one could quite understand. Podge, Jack and Miss Wiz had been taken to an office at the back of the theatre. "I think you've caused quite enough trouble for one night," Trudy told them as she left them there. "I shall inform you when a car is ready to take you all home." She closed the door firmly behind her. "Nice one, Miss Wiz," said Jack. "You've really done it now."
"Yeah," said Podge. "So much for giving peace a chance."
Miss Wiz had slumped into a chair behind the desk and sat, one leg hooked over the arm of the chair. She picked moodily at her electric guitar. "Nobody calls Miss Wiz an old hippie," she said. "But nobody."
"It was an incredible guitar solo," said Podge. "I wish I could play like that."
Miss Wiz smiled. "You will one day," she said. "Start with the ukulele. The solos will come later." At that moment the door opened. It was Cy Smooth. His smile was back in place, and so was his hair. In his hand was a sheet of paper and a pen. "You destroyed my show," he spoke quietly. "You made me look very silly on live TV. The Groovy Butterflies are finished on this show." "You said the boys were good," said Miss Wiz. Cy Smooth gave a little laugh. "They're okay, but I've decided that the other kid, Millie, the little nightingale, is going to win this week. Maybe they can try again next year."
"I thought it was the viewers who decided who wins,"
said Podge. Cy waved him aside. He approached the desk where Miss Wiz was sitting. "But I've never heard anyone play the guitar like that." He smiled toothily at Miss Wiz. "You were incredible out there, babe." "I am not your babe," said Miss Wiz coldly. "Tell you what," said Cy Smooth. "If you agree to let me be your manager, I can make you a rock goddess." Miss Wiz shrugged. "A rock goddess? Me?" "You'll be an international superstar," said Cy. "Playing all round the world. You'll have your own private jet." "I would rather like a private jet," said Miss Wiz quietly. "It's what I've always wanted. I wouldn't mind being an international superstar, come to think of it." Podge cleared his throat, then turned to Jack.
"What was that about magic and selfish purposes Miss Wiz once told us?" he asked.
"Oh, yes," said Jack. "Something about a golden rule, wasn't it?" "Shut up, boys," snapped Cy Smooth. "It's grown-up time." He laid the sheet of paper in front of Miss Wiz and held out a pen. "This is a record contract," he said softly. "It will make you rich and famous. All you have to do is sign." Miss Wiz took the pen, looked at it, then laid it on the desk. She reached into her bag and took out her pink mobile phone. "I need to talk to my people," she said. "Your people?" Cy Smooth looked alarmed. "Who are your people?" Smiling at Podge and Jack, Miss Wiz pressed redial. A low humming noise began to fill the room.
"See you, rock goddess,"
said Podge. She gave a little wave as she began to vanish. "What's happening?"
said Sigh Smooth. "Where's she going? Stop vanishing like that. I can make you a star." With a final little pop, Miss Wiz and her electric guitar disappeared. Sigh Smooth turned to Podge and Jack. "OK, kids, before we order you a taxi, I think you should tell me what's going on here."
"Miss Wiz has left the building," said Jack, like an announcer. "Miss Wiz has left the building."
There was silence in the office for a moment. Podge held up his ukulele.
"Who'd like a song?" he asked.
Wiz Rocks by Terence was read by Suzy Aitchison and is published by BBC Audiobooks. End of Disc 1. Wiz and the Dog from Outer Space by Terence read by Suzy Aitchison. Chapter 1. Psycho Puppy. Tilly Davis looked into her worm farm and sighed. There was no doubt about it, she thought to herself, worms were not the greatest of pets. With her finger, she gently turned the earth, which she had gathered from the park and put into a plastic box to provide a home for her worms. Slither, the biggest worm, seemed to be asleep. So was Twisty, his friend. A smaller worm with a mark on its body, whom Tilly called Scar, moved slowly across the surface of the earth.
"Scar, move, Mum!"
Tilly called out. Tilly's mother bustled into the room, brushing her hair, putting on her watch and talking all at the same time. "We're both going to be late," she said. "If I tell my boss that I missed the train because Scar the pet worm had decided to move a bit, I don't think she'll be very impressed." Tilly covered the 3 worms with earth. "Don't you listen to her, Scar," she whispered. "She loves you, really." "What was that?" She leaned forward and seemed to listen to what the worm was saying.
"Scar says you work too hard, Mum. He says you should chill out like he does."
Mrs. Davis stopped brushing her hair and looked at her daughter. "Maybe it's time to let those worms go," she said more gently. "They aren't really meant to be pets, are they?" Tilly nodded. "I suppose they've had their adventure in the world of humans," she said, standing up. "I'll take them back to the park later today." "Well done, love. And then I'll get some more worms." Mrs. Davis put her hand on Tilly's shoulder. "What about having a proper pet?" she asked. "A hamster, perhaps, or a lovely little guinea pig?"
"I don't believe in keeping animals in a cage,"
said Tilly. "It's like putting them in prison." "And we happen to live in a small flat on the 4th floor, which is much too small for a cat," said her mother.
"What about a dog?"
Tilly asked. Mrs. Davis winced. "They take a lot of time, you know, what with walks and vets and, I don't know, fleas and things. I'm a very busy woman and you're at school." Tilly sighed and picked up the worm farm. "So," she said sadly, "worms it is." Mrs. Davis glanced at her watch. "On your way, then. Jack and Podge will be waiting for you downstairs." Tilly kissed her mother at the front door to their flat. Then, holding the plastic box in front of her, she made her way down the stone steps. As she reached the landing below theirs, a door opened to the sound of snarling and snapping, and 2 large dogs, tugging at their leads, emerged, followed by a big, lumpy teenager who was struggling to control them.
"Hi, Nutter! Hi, Psycho!"
Tilly crouched down in front of the dogs. Seeing her, they began to wag their tails and whimper. Both of them licked her face. It was like going through a very smelly car wash. She glanced up at their owner, who was called Gary, but who preferred to use his nickname.
"Hi, Gob,"
she said.
"You want to watch out for them dogs," he said. "They're killers when they get nasty."
Tilly laughed. "They're just telling me that they want to be let off their leads and have a run in the park."
"Yeah, like they really talk to you,"
said Gary. For the briefest of moments, Tilly thought about telling him that it was true, that she really could understand what dogs wanted. It was as if she could hear their voices in her head. But then she realised that Gary would just think that she was a bit odd.
"Bye, dogs,"
she said. then turned to make her way down the last flight of steps onto the pavement, where Jack and Podge, her friends from St. Barnabas School, were waiting for her. It was not a perfect day at school. During the morning, Class 5's teacher, Mr. Bailey, talked to the class about how the world's climate was changing. Lizzie, who was very interested in the environment, said that if the ice caps started melting, polar bears might become extinct. Jack said that would be really lame because polar bears were his favourite animals. Caroline said she preferred hippopotamuses, especially when they yawned.
"I've got an aunt who's got 2 parrots," said Podge. "They fly round the sitting room and hang off the curtain and do poos on the mantelpiece."
"Excuse me, Class 5, this is not Pet Corner," said Mr. Bailey, rather more loudly than he intended. "We're talking about the future of planet Earth, not about pets and their toilet habits."
Tilly's got worms, thought Jack. At least, he thought he had thought it, but when he noticed that everyone in the class was staring at Tilly, he realised that he must have said the words out loud.
"Worms, Tilly?"
Mr. Bailey seemed to have forgotten about planet Earth for a moment.
"Is this true?"
Tilly was blushing. "What's wrong with having worms?" she muttered.
"That's quite enough of this discussion," said the teacher. "Tilly, the nurse is coming in this afternoon. Please tell her that you've got worms. She'll give you some pills."
"Pills?" said Tilly. "Why would I need pills?" Mr. Bailey seemed oddly embarrassed.
"Well, sometimes if you eat something, these little worms can start growing in your stomach," he said.
"Tilly's worms are in a box," said Podge. "They're her pets, and their names are—"
"Podge," warned Tilly. There was a moment of unusual silence in class.
"Perhaps we could return to the subject of global warming," said Mr. Bailey.
After school, Tilly, Jack and Podge went home together through the park. When they reached a flower bed in the park, Tilly put the worm farm on the ground, then gently turned it over so that the earth and her 3 worms tipped out. "Bye, Scar, bye, Slither, bye, Twisty. I'll miss you." Podge put his hand over his mouth and squeaked, "I will miss you." Jack nudged him in the ribs and frowned.
"Sorry, Till," said Podge. "See you, Twisty, and the others."
They wandered towards the park gate in silence. On their way, Tilly noticed a small wooden shed. She was just about to say to Jack and Podge that she had never noticed it before, when something small, hairy, and black and white appeared at the door of the shed and hurtled towards them. From the way that it nipped Jack's ankle, then Podge's, it seemed to be some sort of angry little dog.
"Ow!"
shouted Jack.
"It's attacking me,"
said Podge, doing a scared little dance. The dog stopped in front of Tilly. It sat down, wagging its tail, and looked at her expectantly, one ear up.
"Where's that puppy gone?"
A woman in a long brown overcoat, holding a broom in her hands, appeared at the door of the shed.
"It's Psycho, that thing,"
Jack called out.
"You should keep it on a lead."
"She just chews through leads." The woman walked towards them, then looked down at the dog, which was still gazing up at Tilly. "She chews through everything."
"Yeah, like my leg,"
said Podge.
"Come here, Thingy,"
said the woman.
"Thingy?"
Jack said to Podge.
"Bit of a funny name for a dog, isn't it?" "Thingy,"
the woman shouted. Then, sighing, she closed her eyes. A faint humming noise could be heard. As if being carried by invisible hands, the dog was lifted in the air and put down at the woman's feet. As she leaned down to pat its head, Jack noticed that the park keeper was wearing black nail varnish.
"Ms. Wiz," he said, "is that you?"
"Unless you know anyone else with a flying dog it is," said Ms. Wiz. "I said I go wherever magic is needed. The litter in this park is a disgrace."
"What's with the dog?"
asked Podge. "It was lost," said Ms. Wiz casually. "I said I would give it a home." From Ms. Wiz's pocket emerged the head of Herbert, the magical rat. In each of his ears was stuffed some cotton.
"Oh, yes, and we don't worry about rats, do we? Because rats don't have feelings, do they? That horrible little thingy is doing my head in."
For the first time, Tilly looked away from the dog towards Miss Wiz. "I know you're magic and all that, but you really shouldn't call a dog it," she said. "And Thingy's not a very nice name either." Miss Wiz sighed. "I know it's not, but there was nothing on the list of names for the dogs of paranormal operatives that I particularly liked. I thought about Matilda or Yapitha, but they weren't quite her somehow." "She says her name is Ruby," said Tilly. "Says?" Miss Wiz looked puzzled. "I know rats and cats can talk, but Ruby, has never said a word to me." "Well, she's talking to me in my head," said Tilly. "She says she's called Ruby and she wants to find her mother." Miss Wiz frowned slightly. "All right, I'll admit it, I'm impressed. I've seen all kinds of magic, but I've never come across a psychic dog." "Ruby says every dog can talk, but that only a few humans can understand them. I happen to be one. And she really wants to know where her mum is." "There is a bit of a problem there," said Miss Wiz. Ruby, has come from rather a long way away." Herbert had pulled the cotton wool out of his ears.
"There is absolutely no question of my returning to that horrible place," he said.
"Excuse me, Miss Wiz," said Tilly. "I thought you always said that you go wherever magic is needed. Just because it's a dog and not a human that needs help, you start making excuses." "Yeah, but Ruby's mum could be anywhere in the world, right?" said Jack. Yes," said Miss Wiz quickly. "Almost right."
"And the last time she did a travelling spell, Class 5 got stuck on the sunny tropical island of Sombrero," said Podge.
"And Class 4 were turned into pigeons," said Jack. "Almost right," asked Tilly. "Why did you say that, Miss Wiz?" "It's just a little thing," said Miss Wiz. "But in order to find Ruby's mother, we would have to cross the universe to a distant planet. There's just a possibility we might take a wrong turning and end up completely lost in space."
"Yeah, don't you just hate it when that happens?"
said Jack. "Poor Ruby," said Tilly. "She'll never ever see her mummy again." Miss Wiz seemed to be thinking.
"Oh, all right," she said suddenly. "Let's all go into space for a while."
There was a moment of unenthusiastic silence in the park. It was Podge who spoke first.
"The problem is, I've got quite an important appointment. It's with some baked beans on toast back at my place." "I've really got to do my homework," said Jack. "There's this really important geography project."
Herbert the rat wriggled out of Miss Wiz's pocket and down the leg of her trousers.
"You can include me out, old girl," he said. "I do get so frightfully travel-sick."
"So, it looks like just you and me then," said Miss Wiz to Tilly. "You hold on to one of Ruby's ears and I'll get the other."
"Are you going to freeze time while you step into another dimension?" Jack asked. "Otherwise Tilly's mum will be worried."
Podge groaned.
"Why does time always stand still when it's time for my tea?" he said.
"There's no need for time to stand still," said Miss Wiz. "We'll be back soon enough." She closed her eyes, and soon all around them could be heard a low humming noise. Gradually, she and Tilly and Ruby faded from view.
Jack shrugged. "There's no talking to that Miss Wiz once she decides something." "Well, at least I don't have to wait for my tea," said Podge.
"I think you do," said Jack, taking out his mobile. "We better call Mrs. Davis and tell her that her daughter's in outer space looking for a dog."
From ground level, there was a small, polite cough. It was Herbert the rat.
"Ahem. I think you chaps may have forgotten something," he said. "All I'll be requiring is a nice warm armpit to sleep in and the occasional chocolate biscuit."
"Can't you look after yourself?" asked Jack. "Rats are famous for being able to survive anywhere."
"I think you might be mistaking me for an ordinary rat," said Herbert. "Now be good lads and just pick me up."
Podge reached down for him, and before he could object, Herbert had wriggled between the buttons of his shirt.
"Ah, it tickles,"
said Podge, writhing about a bit. A muffled voice came from inside Podge's shirt as Herbert snuggled down.
Nice armpit.
Chapter 2. One Weird Planet. There are normally certain problems in travelling through space. You have to wear a spacesuit and helmet because there is no oxygen to breathe. You float about a bit because there is no gravity to keep you in your seat. If you go really fast, you can actually go back in time. In space, someone can pretty quickly become their own grandparent. Fortunately for Tilly, magical space travel was different. It was simply a question of flying through the infinite blackness of the universe while holding on to a dog's ear and chatting as you go. As she, Miss Wiz and Ruby passed Mars, Miss Wiz was talking about her first pet, which had been a baby dinosaur.
A dinosaur? Said Tilly. You know, I had no idea you were quite that old.
Miss Wiz smiled modestly. I must say that I really don't look too bad for someone who has been knocking around since the beginning of time. You know what the secret is, Tilly? A sensible diet, lots of exercise, and at least 3 spells every day. Tilly gazed across the universe.
I've always wondered what it was like during the Ice Age, she said.
Brrr! Miss Wiz gave a little shiver. Don't even talk about it. But let me tell you about my pet dinosaur. And so, as they flew past Mars, Jupiter and Pluto, Miss Wiz and Tilly chatted about pets until they reached the planet where Ruby had once been born. The journey took a little over 20 minutes. As they entered the atmosphere of the planet, the sky around them changed from black to a pinkish grey and then to a bright gold. As the 3 of them landed gently on some grass, Tilly realised that the gold came from a warm and friendly sun above their heads. She looked around her. There were fields, trees, the sound of birds singing. Ruby was so excited that she galloped crazily in circles, yapping with joy. Miss Wiz looked around her and smiled. I've always thought it was rather a nice place. It's called Planet Grrr.
It's just like the countryside on Earth, said Tilly.
Look! She pointed to a hillside nearby. I think I can see houses. That would be Grrr Town, the only town on planet Grrr. It's where all the Grrrians live.
Funny name, Planet Grrr, said Tilly. Is there any reason it's called that?
Yes, said Miss Wiz. As it happens, there is. On the other side of the universe, Tilly's mother was panicking. Let me just get this right, she said when Jack telephoned her. You're telling me that you met up with an old friend called Miss Wiz in the park, that she has magic powers and a dog from outer space, and that she's now gone off to a distant planet with Tilly and the dog? That's about it, said Jack. I'm sure everything will be fine. After all, Miss Wiz is a grown-up. Sort of, anyway. From Mrs. Davis's handbag came the sound of her mobile's ringtone. I've got a text, she said. It might be her.
Mrs. Davis, she's in outer...
Bye. Mrs. Davis scrabbled in her bag for the mobile phone, then opened the text. It was from Tilly. She sighed with relief, then read what Tilly had written. Gone into space with Miss Wiz, back soon. T. Kiss, 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 kiss. Breathing deeply, Tilly's mother closed her mobile. The important thing is not to panic, she murmured. It's only space after all. She picked up the phone and dialed 999. Hello, police, she said in a wobbly voice. I'd like to report a missing person. So, that's the reason it's called Planet Grrr, Miss Wiz was saying as they sat on a hill overlooking Grrr Town. It's because the place is entirely run by dogs. Except on this planet, they prefer to be called Grrians.
Weird, said Tilly.
And I can't believe that I can still text my mum from here. You couldn't in the old days, said Miss Wiz. You had to use carrier pigeons. Now, thanks to modern magic, it's all much easier. Tilly was wondering how exactly there could be carrier pigeons in space, when suddenly she noticed some movement in the town.
There's a human over there, she said. So it's not just dogs.
There are humans, said Miss Wiz carefully, but they're not quite the same as us.
They look the same, said Tilly.
The humans here are actually pets, said Miss Wiz. The Grrians keep them for fun and for doing tasks. On planet Grr, humans are like horses for humans back on Earth. She stood up. Perhaps we should take a closer look. Under the gentle sun of planet Grr, Miss Wiz and Tilly walked slowly towards the town. As they approached, Tilly noticed that in front of each of the little houses were beautiful wooden kennels. In one street, the humans were making a new kennel for the dogs. Strangest of all, the humans were dressed exactly the same in a light beige tracksuit. At a park nearby, a group of humans were running around and playing, watched by 3 dogs who seemed to be talking among themselves.
This is one strange planet, said Tilly.
Yes, it is rather different, Miss Wiz agreed. Look at the playground.
Tilly gasped. It's for dogs, she said. There are balls everywhere and bones on strings that they can jump for. There's a toy cat that runs up trees. That's so sweet.
Ruby walked ahead of them, and when Tilly called her, the dog ignored her. On planet Grr, humans follow dogs, not the other way around, said Miss Wiz as she reached under a nearby bush and took out a small suitcase. When she opened it, there were 2 beige tracksuits. Slip it on, she said. From now on, we're Ruby's pets. In their new beige pet uniforms, Miss Wiz and Tilly followed Ruby. When they reached the first house, Tilly noticed 2 humans in the backyard. They paced up and down the fence, saying when they passed each other, "Nice day."
Nice day.
Mustn't grumble.
Takes all sorts.
Tilly shook her head.
It's like they can only do small talk. No real conversation, she said in a low voice.
On Grr, the humans just make friendly noises to each other, said Miss Wiz. All the thinking is done by dogs. Hearing them talk, Ruby turned and barked at them to stay closer.
It's a nice place to visit, planet Grr, Tilly murmured under her breath.
But I don't think I'd want to live here. Chapter 3. Walkies. Jack Beddoes and Peter Harris, also known as Podge. Sitting in an office at St Barnabas School, P.C. Boot made a careful note in his notebook. He glanced at the 2 boys sitting opposite him. They looked like troublemakers, he thought, but since they were the only witnesses to the disappearance of Tilly Davis, he had to take a statement from them. He wished he was out in a police car, chasing thieves with the light flashing and the siren going like other policemen. "All right, boys," he said. "Tell me in your own words what happened." Jack and Podge took turns to tell the story of what happened in the park, as the policeman noted it down. "Went to the park," he murmured as he wrote. "Buried some worms, saw a small dog. Noticed the park keeper. Turned out to be Miss Wiz." At this point, P.C. Boot groaned to himself. Whenever that Wiz woman was involved, trouble was never far away. Decided to look for the dog's mother. Discovered it came from another planet. Tilly held its ears. Disappeared into outer space. Slowly, P.C. Boot put his pencil back in his top pocket. "You should be aware, Jack and Peter, that wasting police time is a very serious offence, even if you are a bloomin' kid. You could end up in court."
"But they did disappear into space,"
Jack protested. "Yeah, and I'm a Dutchman," said the policeman.
The Dutch will be pleased."
The voice, thin, posh and slightly muffled, came from the direction of Podge's armpit. "What was that you just said?" P.C. Boot sat forward in his chair.
Nothing," said Podge. "It's just that my armpit makes some funny noises now and then. It's a medical condition."
Medical condition. Because he couldn't think of anything to say, the policeman noted down the words. "Right.
I have one last question. How did you know that the dog was missing its mother?
Before either of them could answer, Herbert spoke from the direction of Peter's armpit.
Maybe it was feeling a little rough. Get it? Rough. Rough. Like a dog.
He chortled wheezily.
Sometimes I think I should be on the stage.
Right, that's it.
The policeman sprang to his feet.
I'm reporting you both for inappropriateness. If I discover that Tilly Davis is not in space, which frankly I doubt very much, you both could end up in court.
Without another word, P.C. Boot stormed out of the room, walked quickly across the playground, jumped into his car and drove off with the tyres squealing. Oh dear! Herbert poked his head through the front of Podge's shirt. Was it something I said? On planet Grrr, things weren't going to plan either. Ruby lay with her chin resting on her paws in the kennel that had been found for her. Ms. Wiz and Tilly were locked up with a few other humans in a house nearby. Tilly had tried to talk to the humans, but although they seemed to understand, they would smile blankly and say something really boring like, "Turned out nice again?" or "Takes all sorts, doesn't it?" or, a particular favourite, "Well, as long as you've got your health." After a while, Tilly gave up trying to talk to them. "The humans round here aren't exactly great at conversation," she murmured to Ms. Wiz. "They're pets," said Ms. Wiz. "Their green owners don't like them to think too much." Through the barred window, they noticed that Ruby was trotting towards the house. As she opened the door, the human pets began running about and jumping up and down in an excited way. Ruby barked once and the humans sat down, looking sorry for themselves. She glanced towards Ms. Wiz and Tilly. "What's she saying to us?" asked Ms. Wiz. "Walkies," said Tilly. Ms. Wiz shook her head. "I really can't get used to being a pet," she said. They followed Ruby out of the door and waited as she locked it behind her with her teeth. Then she looked up at Tilly. When she had finished, Tilly turned to Ms. Wiz. "Ruby has been told that her mother isn't here," she said. "There's a rumour that she has been captured by the enemy." "Enemy? Who could be an enemy of the Gurrians?" Tilly frowned. "Cats," she said. "Ruby's mum has been captured by cats." Chapter 4. A Historic Moment for Ratkind. Mr. Harris, Podge's father, prided himself on being respectable.
"I may not be rich and I may not be handsome,"
he used to say to Mrs. Harris,
"but at least I'm a respectable man. Isn't that right, Mother?"
"It certainly is," Mrs. Harris used to say. "Respectability is your middle name." So, when his front doorbell rang and there, standing on his doorstep, was a policeman, Mr. Harris assumed there had been a mistake.
"Wrong house, young man,"
he said, making to close the door.
"We're a law-abiding family here."
"You are the father of Peter Harris, also known as Podge,"
said P.C. Boot, in the deep, grown-up voice which he sometimes practised in front of the mirror when he was at home.
"I am,"
said Mr. Harris.
"Then we need to have a little chat,"
said P.C. Boot. The Harris family, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, and squeezed between them their only son Podge, sat on the sofa waiting for P.C. Boot to find the right page in his notebook.
"I have made some very careful notes," he muttered. "It's just a question of finding them among the other crimes I'm working on."
"Crimes?"
Mr. Harris spoke sharply.
"I'll not have talk of crimes in this house. Respectability is my middle name."
"Here we are."
Smiling with relief, P.C. Boot smoothed down the page of his notebook.
"I am currently investigating a very unusual case. Tilly Davis, young Peter's classmate from St. Barnabas, has disappeared, allegedly to the other end of the universe."
"Other end of the universe?"
said Mr. Harris.
"I've never heard such piffle."
P.C. Boot held up a hand, as if he was directing traffic.
"Now, we know that there has been text communication between Tilly and her mother. Mrs. Davis asked Tilly where she was and received the reply—"
The policeman checked his notebook.
Plunt grr. At this point in time, we do not precisely know what or where Plunt grr is.
Plunt could be planet, suggested Podge.
P.C. Boot looked at him coldly, then smiled at his father.
We are not stupid down at the police station, Mr. Harris. We know that nobody can text from the other end of the universe. It's way out of range. Unfortunately, your boy and his friend Jack have gone along with this ridiculous story.
But it's true,
said Podge.
And in addition, said the policeman, your boy made some extremely rude comments from the direction of his armpit.
Rude? said Mr. Harris.
Armpit?
said Mrs. Harris. Podge was just wondering how to explain what happened when Herbert the rat, who was under his shirt, made the decision for him.
Can't think what the silly man's talking about,
he said in a loud voice.
There!
With a shaking hand, P.C. Boot pointed at Podge's armpit.
He's doing it again.
How on earth do you do that, Peter? asked Mrs. Harris.
It's a sort of magic thing,
said Podge.
Aha!
P.C. Boot leapt to his feet.
Now you're in trouble, young man.
He thumbed through his notebook and took out a piece of paper which he waved triumphantly.
This is an ASBO, an antisocial behaviour order. Normally, ASBOs are to stop kids painting graffiti or vandalising property or frightening people. But this one's different.
He glanced at the sheet in his hand.
It bans Ms. Wiz, alias Dolores Wisdom, alias Diamante Wizporino, alias Dr. Wisdom, alias Ms. Wizbrovich, from magic, spells, or any paranormal...
As the policeman was speaking, a long, loud, and very rude noise came from Podge's armpit.
Magic, spells...
P.C. Boot's normally pale face had gone quite red.
You're in breach of the ASBO. I'll take you down to the station, I will.
It was at that moment that there were signs of movement at the front of Podge's shirt. Herbert squeezed himself out and sat on Podge's lap. Mrs. Harris gave a little scream.
It's a rat,
she gasped.
Calm down, young lady, said Herbert.
A talking rat,
said Mrs. Harris, but then gave a little smile.
Did he say young lady?
I am indeed a talking rat.
Herbert gave a little bow in the direction of Mrs. Harris.
It was not this charming young man who was doing the magic, but moi.
He gave a little bow.
Herbert, the enchanted, the enchanting rat at your service.
Herbert, this is my mum,
said Podge.
Your mother? Impossible. She's much too young and much too... slim.
Oh, Mrs. Harris seemed to be blushing. He's quite charming for a rat, isn't he?
I may be a rat, madam, but I can appreciate a beautiful woman when I see one, said Herbert.
Do you? Mrs. Harris looked down, smiling shyly. Do you really think I'm beautiful? Mr. Harris pointed an accusing finger at Herbert.
Is that rodent flirting with my wife?
He asked angrily.
That's just the way he is, Dad,
Podge said quickly.
He likes to be polite.
P.C. Boot loomed over Herbert.
Do you belong to Miss Wiz?
He asked. Herbert gave a little laugh.
If anything, she belongs to me. Frankly, I'm the brains of the outfit. In that case, said P.C. Boot, I have no choice but to arrest you for committing magic in a public place.
Herbert held out his paws in front of him.
Handcuff me then, officer, he said in a tragic voice. Take me to the cells. I shall be a martyr to magic. 'Tis a far, far better thing that I do. Shut it, rat, said P.C. Boot. Save your speeches for the judge.
He turned to Mr. Harris.
Would you happen to have some kind of box so that I can take the accused into custody? He asked. We certainly do, officer. The sooner that rat's off the premises, the happier I'll be.
I thought he was rather nice, said Mrs. Harris weakly. Lovely old-fashioned manners.
Why couldn't you just keep your mouth shut for a change, Herbert?
Podge muttered to Herbert.
I shall not be silenced, said Herbert. There are times when even a rodent has to stand up for his rights.
This is a historic moment for rat-kind.
Podge shook his head.
Earth to Ms. Wiz, he murmured. You're needed back here, urgently.
Crawling through the undergrowth on planet Grrr behind Ruby the dog, Ms. Wiz was thinking she would quite like to be back on Earth too.
Dogs in charge, cat terrorists, humans as pets, she whispered to Tilly. Aren't you glad you don't live here?
Ruby looked over her shoulder, baring her teeth slightly.
She's telling us to be quiet, said Tilly. We're getting near the cat's camp.
They stopped. Across a small valley there was a small wood. In the low branches of the trees of the wood was an extraordinary sight. There were hundreds of cats of all colours and sizes. In a clearing beyond them could be seen 5 dogs. As Tilly and Ms. Wiz watched, one dog tried to escape. The cats let it run for a while, then surrounded it.
They're playing with the dog as if it's a mouse,
Tilly whispered. Ruby whined.
Perhaps Ruby could divert the cat's attention, said Tilly. Then we could sneak round the back and...
But Ms. Wiz had stood up. I think it's time to stop being a pet. Ruby growled.
She's telling you to sit, said Tilly.
But Ms. Wiz was walking down the slope of the valley, then up the other side. As she approached, the cats turned towards her, ears back, hissing.
Nice pussies, said Ms. Wiz. Kitty, kitty.
The cats crouched down, their hackles rising.
Oh, suit yourself,
said Ms. Wiz. There was a low humming noise, and suddenly, in the place of the cats, there were hundreds of mice. They've just learned an important lesson, said Ms. Wiz as the mice scurried for cover. It doesn't pay to mess with humans, especially paranormal ones. A streak of black and white dashed past her into the wood. Soon, Ruby and a dog that looked just like her were tumbling over one another, yelping with excitement. Moments later, Tilly arrived.
I think Ruby may have found her mum, she said.
Chapter 5. Big place, the universe. In Grrr Town, a group of dogs surrounded Ms. Wiz and Tilly. There was growling, yapping, snapping and snarling. Now and then, one of the larger dogs would bare its teeth in the general direction of Ms. Wiz. Well, I must say, that's not very grateful. Ms. Wiz was trying not to look scared. She looked down to their feet where Ruby and her mother, whose name turned out to be Grendel, were cowering. Tilly was following the conversation of the angry dogs that surrounded them. Some of the Grrians are saying it was great that the cat terrorists have all been turned into mice and the hostages rescued, but most of them are angry that it was a human pet who did it, and they're worried you might turn them into mice too. They're right to be worried, said Ms. Wiz. I'm very tempted indeed. As she spoke, a dangerous silence descended on the pack of dogs. Ah! Ms. Wiz smiled as bravely as she could manage. It looks as if the Wolf Parliament has just managed to make up its mind. Tilly didn't laugh.
Ms. Wiz,
she said urgently, I think it's time for us to go. The dogs moved closer, their eyes glinting, a low growl in their throats. Then, distantly, another noise, a sort of hum, could be heard. Very slowly, said Ms. Wiz quietly, lean down and hold Ruby's ears. I'll hold on to Grendel. Hang on. She closed her eyes. I've just got to turn the mice back into cats. When she looked again, the dogs were crouching, ready to pounce. The growling grew louder.
Now, Ms. Wiz!
Screamed Tilly.
Now!
Back on Earth, Tilly's mother was just arriving at the police station, followed by Podge and Jack. In spite of the texts that she had received from Tilly, she was becoming more and more worried about her daughter being lost in space. Travelling across the universe accompanied by a paranormal operative and a dog just wasn't natural. She pushed through the door of the police station and strode up to the desk where PC Boot was standing. I believe you have arrested a rat, she said. I need to talk to it. PC Boot squared his shoulders.
I am not at liberty to divulge who is in custody at this police station, human or rat, he said.
But we know he's here, Constable,
said Podge in his sweetest, most polite voice.
I saw you take him away in a shoebox.
P.C. Boot looked bored.
I repeat, I am not at liberty to...
With a sudden movement, Mrs. Davis reached out and grabbed the front of P.C. Boot's uniform. As she brought her face close to his, she seemed to lift him off the ground. When she spoke, it was quietly and through gritted teeth.
My daughter is missing, believed lost in space. The rat knows where she is. We are going to talk to the rat right now. It's really a very simple matter.
But there's an Espo.
The policeman's eyes glanced left and right, looking for help, but he was on his own. Mrs. Davis tightened her grip.
Do you want me to get seriously angry? She asked.
Put me down,
P.C. Boot said hoarsely,
and I'll take you to the rat.
Herbert was locked up in a cage on a table in a brightly lit room. He was not happy. As soon as Tilly's mum, Jack and Podge followed P.C. Boot through the door, he started complaining.
I am not used to this treatment, he said in a weak, tired voice. It's uncomfortable. I can't sleep. There's no one to talk to. And the toilet facilities are frankly unforgivable.
Mrs. Davis shook her head in amazement.
You were right, Podge.
It really does talk, she said.
That will be he, if you don't mind, madam, said Herbert. He would be well advised not to talk any more, said P.C. Boot. A talking rat counts as magic in my book, and right now magic is against the law. But if humans are allowed to speak, why can't I? Asked Herbert. This is ratism, pure and simple.
Mrs. Davis pulled up a chair and sat by the table so that she was at the same level as the cage. Mr. Herbert, we would like very much to know where Miss Wiz has gone with my daughter. All we know is that she's somewhere in the universe. Herbert scratched the side of his nose.
Big place, the universe.
Herbert, said Podge sharply, this isn't a joke.
Suddenly the light bulb in the room flickered, then faded. For a few seconds there was darkness. Then, slowly, with a distant hum which grew louder and louder, the light returned. The room was crowded now with 2 extra people. They were crouched on the floor, and each seemed to be holding the ears of a dog.
Miss Wiz, said Jack.
Tilly, said Mrs. Davis.
Mum.
For a moment there was confusion in the police station. Tilly ran into her mother's arms. The dogs barked. Miss Wiz explained to Jack and Podge what had happened. P.C. Boot tried to keep order. In his cage, Herbert closed his eyes wearily.
The same old Miss Wiz, he murmured. She just has to be the centre of attention.
P.C. Boot moved purposefully towards Miss Wiz. From the top pocket of his uniform, he took out his notebook.
Miss Wiz, I am arresting you for committing magic in breach of your ASBO.
Magic? Miss Wiz looked puzzled. Who on earth is ASBO?
As a specific example of the heretofore mentioned illegal magic, I have noted the following. Being in possession of a talking rat. Boring, Herbert sang out. Disappearing to the other side of the universe, P.C. Boot continued, and appearing out of thin air in a police station without having first reported at the front desk.
Miss Wiz was smiling dangerously. Is that all? She said quietly. I can do much better spells than that. A humming noise filled the room. P.C. Boot looked around, suddenly confused.
What was I going to say?
He frowned to himself.
Why am I carrying this notebook? Why am I in a uniform? What am I doing here?
Your memory is now entirely blank, said Miss Wiz.
But who am I?
Said P.C. Boot.
I don't even know my name.
Now, Miss Wiz ignored the policeman. Let's get things sorted out. Herbert, you poor old thing. She opened the cage and held out her hand. Murmuring,
You have simply no idea what I've been through."
Herbert wriggled into Miss Wiz's sleeve and up her arm, from where his muffled voice could be heard complaining.
She sugars off to the other side of the universe, and does she give a thought for me? Not a chance. I'm just a rat. I'll be all right. It's just me with that Miss Wiz.
"What are these dogs doing here?" asked Tilly's mother. Miss Wiz groaned. "Why did I agree to bring them both back to Earth? I can't possibly look after 2 dogs. At her feet, Ruby whined. Tilly listened for a moment, then whispered in her mother's ear. Mrs. Davis glanced down at Ruby, who put her head on one side and cocked her ear as if waiting for a reply. "Miss Wiz," said Tilly, "Ruby asked me if she can come and live with us, and my mum, I think, has just agreed. And I would keep Grendel." Miss Wiz smiled with relief. "It's perfect. That puppy was exhausting me. They can meet in the park now and then." She knelt down beside Ruby. "You stay here," she whispered. "I'll see you soon." She held on to Grendel's ear and closed her eyes. A faint humming noise could be heard. "Wait!" shouted Podge. "What about—" He nodded in the direction of PC Boot, who was still looking about like a man lost in a maze. Miss Wiz stood in front of him and looked into his eyes. "You are a community policeman," she said quietly. "Your name is Gavin Boot." The policeman blinked twice, then sighed sadly.
"Do I have to be?"
he asked. But Miss Wiz and Grendel were fading from view. Very faintly a voice could be heard. "See you in the park, Tilly." There was a single bark of farewell from Grendel, and then silence. On planet Grrr, 2 human pets were talking. "Nice day," said one.
"Mustn't grumble,"
said the other.
"as long as you've got your health."
"Remember that human pet who came to visit? The one who rescued the hostages from the cats?" said the first.
"Yeah."
"Well, I've been thinking." Ms. Wiz and the Dog from Outer Space by Terence Blacker was read by Suzy Aitchison and is published by BBC Audiobooks.
He held out one of the drawings and began to trace a path slowly through the tangled lines between blobs that said things like fireplaces and basins.
"See? There's a gap here and here and here. If you know how to zigzag from one gap to another, you can get through. But anyone who doesn't know will get caught up in the thread."
Clipper looked doubtful. "Sounds very fiddly." "You do it if you want to. I'm going to look at the models. I bet Thrasher knocked something over when he was crashing about last night." She crouched over the plastic bottles and groaned when she found a broken windmill. But the damage wasn't too bad, and in a few seconds she was busy fixing things.
"Come on, Gobbo,"
Spag pulled Barney outside.
"Let's get going on the burglar alarm. Do you think your mother will give us some black thread?" "Go and ask her," Barney said. "I'll look round the yard. We need some things that'll make a noise if they're pulled over." "Make sure they're things your dad won't want," said Spag. "We don't want to annoy him."
Barney nodded and wandered off. The yard was a fabulous place to hunt for junk. Things were stacked under and over and inside other things in towering, tottering piles. Some of the objects were so peculiar that Barney couldn't guess what they were for. There were plenty of things that would make a noise. He found 3 old brass bells, a heap of 6 tin trays, and a set of blackened billy cans. Carrying everything on the biggest tray, he began to pick his way back across the yard to the Futurescope.